Al Capone. The name alone evokes images of pinstripe suits, Tommy guns, and a brutal era in American history. His legacy is one of both infamy and fascination, a symbol of the dark side of the American dream. He was a man who embodied the Roaring Twenties, a time of both exhilarating progress and shocking lawlessness. The Jazz Age, with its speakeasies and flapper dancers, was a backdrop to his rise in the criminal underworld. Capone's story is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the seductive nature of power and the devastating consequences of its unchecked pursuit. His arrest marked the beginning of the end for an era defined by organized crime. It is a story that continues to fascinate, repulse, and provoke, even decades after his death. The public's reaction to his trial and conviction was a mix of relief and intrigue as they witnessed the fall of a criminal empire. Capone's life was a study in contrasts. He was a ruthless criminal mastermind who orchestrated countless acts of violence. His gang ruled the streets with an iron fist, leaving a trail of blood and fear. Yet, he cultivated a public persona of a benevolent benefactor, a man of the people. He donated to charities and helped the poor, creating a complex image that baffled many. He was a devoted family man who doted on his son, yet he was responsible for the deaths of countless fathers, sons, and brothers. His duality was a stark reminder of the thin line between love and violence. To understand Al Capone is to understand the complex interplay of ambition, greed, and the allure of the American dream gone wrong. His wealth and power were built on the suffering of others, a dark reflection of the era's excesses and moral ambiguities. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born in 1899 to Italian immigrant parents in the rough-and-tumble streets of Brooklyn, New York. His parents, Gabriele and Teresa Capone, had come to America seeking a better life, but the reality they faced was far from the dream they had envisioned. Life in the tenements was harsh, and young Al learned quickly that survival depended on street smarts and a willingness to fight. The crowded, noisy streets were a battleground where only the toughest could thrive. He was a bright but restless student, chafing against the confines of the classroom. Despite his intelligence, the rigid structure of school life did not suit him, and he often found himself in trouble with teachers and authorities. The streets offered adventure, camaraderie, and the allure of easy money. For a young boy with a restless spirit, the bustling life outside the classroom was far more appealing. Capone fell in with a local gang, the 5 Points Gang, notorious for its petty theft and street brawls. This gang was a melting pot of young men, each with their own dreams of power and wealth. It was here that he received his brutal education in the ways of the underworld, learning the codes of loyalty, violence, and the pursuit of power at any cost. The gang's activities were a far cry from the simple mischief of childhood. They were engaged in serious criminal enterprises. He embraced this new life with a ferocity that would become his trademark. Capone's rise in the criminal world was swift, driven by his ambition and ruthless determination to succeed, no matter the cost. In 1919, at the dawn of Prohibition, Capone's life took a decisive turn. His mentor, the notorious gangster Johnny Torrio, summoned him to Chicago. The city was on the verge of a massive power vacuum. The ban on alcohol had created a lucrative black market, and rival gangs were vying for control of the city's booming bootlegging operations. Torrio recognized Capone's ruthlessness and ambition, seeing in him a valuable asset in the brewing gang war. Capone, eager to prove himself and drawn by the promise of untold riches, readily accepted the challenge. He arrived in Chicago with a reputation that preceded him, a young and ambitious gangster, ready to carve out his own empire in the Windy City. Under Torrio's tutelage, Capone rose quickly through the ranks of Chicago's underworld. He was shrewd and calculating, but also possessed a volatile temper and a penchant for violence that instilled fear in his rivals. Capone was instrumental in expanding Torrio's bootlegging empire, muscling out competition through intimidation, bribery, and sheer brutality. His cunning extended beyond brute force. Capone understood the power of image and cultivated a carefully crafted public persona. He presented himself as a businessman, a benefactor to the city, even as his illegal operations generated millions. He donated to charities, opened soup kitchens during the Depression, and was always accessible to the press, charming them with his wit and charisma. By the mid-1920s, Torrio, weary of the escalating violence, ceded control of his empire to Capone. At just 26 years old, Al Capone was the undisputed king of Chicago, presiding over a vast criminal network that included bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, and racketeering. His wealth and power seemed limitless. Capone ruled with an iron fist, eliminating rivals with ruthless efficiency. His enforcers, armed with Tommy guns and sawed-off shotguns, terrorized the city. Politicians and law enforcement were on his payroll, ensuring his immunity from prosecution. Capone's reign of terror reached its zenith with the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre, a gruesome act of violence that shocked the nation and cemented his place in American history. On February 14, 1929, Capone orchestrated a plan to eliminate his arch-rival, Bugs Moran. Moran and his men were lured to a garage on the north side of Chicago, believing they were about to receive a shipment of hijacked whiskey. Instead, they were met by a hail of bullets fired by 4 gunmen dressed as police officers. The massacre, a brazen act of violence carried out in broad daylight, sent shockwaves through the nation. The public, long accustomed to Capone's brazen disregard for the law, was horrified by the brutality of the killings. The outcry was deafening, and the pressure on law enforcement to bring Capone to justice reached a fever pitch. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre proved to be a turning point in Capone's reign. Public outrage forced the hand of President Herbert Hoover, who vowed to bring down the notorious gangster. Enter Eliot Ness, a young and ambitious Prohibition agent, tasked with leading a team of incorruptible agents known as the Untouchables. Ness and his team, incorruptible and relentless, launched a series of raids on Capone's breweries and speakeasies, chipping away at his vast fortune. Realizing that they couldn't convict Capone on violence or bootlegging charges, they focused on a different strategy: tax evasion. The net closed in on Capone in 1931. Ness and his team, with the help of the IRS, built an airtight case against the gangster. Capone, accustomed to operating with impunity, was finally brought to justice. His trial, a media spectacle, captivated the nation. Despite his best efforts to buy his way out, Capone was found guilty on multiple counts of tax evasion. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, a stunning fall from grace for a man who once seemed untouchable. The myth of Al Capone, the invincible kingpin, was shattered. Capone's imprisonment marked the end of an era. His empire, built on violence and corruption, crumbled without his leadership. His story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most powerful figures are not above the law. Capone's time in prison was a far cry from his days of luxury and power. He was diagnosed with syphilis, the consequence of his years spent in Chicago's underworld, and his health deteriorated rapidly. The once feared gangster was reduced to a shadow of his former self. After serving 7 years of his sentence, Capone was released from prison in 1939. However, he was a broken man, his body ravaged by disease, and his mind clouded by the effects of syphilis. He spent the remaining years of his life in seclusion, his once sharp mind dulled, his reign of terror a distant memory. Despite his downfall, Capone's story continued to fascinate the public. He became a cultural icon, his image emblazoned on everything from t-shirts to coffee mugs. His life story was the subject of countless books, films, and television shows, each attempting to unravel the enigma of the man behind the myth. Al Capone's legacy is a complex one, shrouded in both infamy and fascination. He was a ruthless criminal who terrorized a city, orchestrating violent crimes and illegal enterprises with an iron fist. Yet he was also a product of his time, emerging from the tough streets of Brooklyn and rising to power in Chicago. His rise was a reflection of the lawlessness and corruption that gripped America during the Prohibition era, a time when the illegal alcohol trade flourished. His story serves as a cautionary tale, illustrating the perils of unchecked ambition and the seductive nature of power. Capone's influence extended beyond the criminal underworld, infiltrating politics and law enforcement, showing how deeply corruption can penetrate society. Capone's life and crimes continue to fascinate us, perhaps because they offer a glimpse into a darker side of the American dream, where morality is often overshadowed by the pursuit of wealth and power. His lavish lifestyle, complete with luxury cars and high society events, was a stark contrast to the poverty many Americans faced during the Great Depression. In Capone's world, success was measured in wealth and power, regardless of the cost to others or to society at large. His story is a stark reminder that the pursuit of the American dream can be a double-edged sword, leading to both great triumph and devastating ruin. The legacy of Al Capone endures, a testament to the complexities of human nature and the enduring allure of power and wealth, even at the cost of one's soul.